She sat on the edge of the hospital bed, clutching the newborn wrapped in a pale blanket. To anyone watching, it looked like a perfect moment, a proud husband smiling, believing his child had just entered the world. But inside her chest, her heart thudded with a secret she could never confess. The man standing proudly at her side wasn't the child's father. Every time his hand brushed hers in reassurance, she felt a stabbing guilt that twisted like a knife. One lie had snowballed into a betrayal so devastating that the truth could shatter not just a marriage, but 2 lives forever. Her name was Emily, a woman who had built her life around appearances. From the outside, everything seemed flawless: a suburban home with white shutters, a husband who adored her, and a promising career she'd worked hard to earn. Friends admired the stability of her marriage to Daniel, a man whose kindness was his defining trait. To neighbors, they were the couple who had it all. But perfection, as Emily knew, was often an illusion. Daniel came from a family that had known hardship. His parents had struggled to build a life in a world that constantly reminded them of what they lacked. Yet Daniel had risen above, working long hours at a construction firm, pouring sweat into every beam, every foundation, to ensure Emily never had to want for anything. His dream was simple: a family. Children who would carry his name, his legacy, and perhaps ease the wounds of a childhood filled with scarcity. Emily loved him, or at least, she had convinced herself she did. He was gentle, dependable, the kind of man any woman would want beside her. But love built on stability sometimes lacked fire. And it was in that absence, in the quiet loneliness of routine, that temptation found her. At work, she met Marcus. He wasn't better than Daniel in any measurable way. He didn't earn more, didn't offer safety. But Marcus had something Daniel didn't: a raw, intoxicating energy. He was unpredictable, daring, and made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. What began as stolen glances became after-work drinks. Drinks became late-night conversations. And conversations turned into something that crossed a line she could never uncross. Emily told herself it was only once, that guilt would stop her. But one time became many. Each morning, she would look at Daniel and wonder how he couldn't see the cracks forming. She cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, played the part of the perfect wife, while hiding a truth that burned her alive. Then came the day she missed her period. The test confirmed what she feared: pregnant. Daniel's joy was immediate, almost overwhelming. He kissed her forehead, held her close, whispered about names and nurseries. For him, this was the moment he had dreamed of his entire life. But for Emily, it was the moment her nightmare began. Whose child was it? She didn't know. And that uncertainty became the weight she carried every day of her pregnancy. Marcus had disappeared from her life once she told him, cowardice wrapped in apologies. He didn't want to be involved. Daniel, meanwhile, doted on her, attended appointments, painted the nursery himself after long shifts at work. Every stroke of his brush was an act of love she knew she didn't deserve. As the months passed, the guilt gnawed at her. At night, she would wake to the sound of Daniel's breathing beside her, steady and trusting, and wonder how long it would last. She avoided mirrors, avoided thinking of the day the baby would come and the truth might slip free in features that didn't resemble Daniel's. But she kept silent. Because telling the truth meant destroying the man who had given her everything. The pregnancy was not just a physical burden, but an emotional prison. Every ultrasound brought questions. Did the baby's profile resemble Daniel? Could the curve of a nose betray the truth? Emily became hyper-aware of everything. When doctors spoke, she analyzed their expressions, fearing they saw something she didn't. Daniel's happiness only grew. He would hold her belly, speaking to the unborn child as if it could hear. He promised to teach them to ride a bike, to never let them go to bed without knowing they were loved. His eyes shone with a hope that pierced Emily's soul like glass. Meanwhile, whispers began to surface. People at work had noticed her closeness with Marcus before he left the company. A colleague once joked, "Careful, Emily, you and Marcus looked too cozy." She had laughed it off, but the words replayed in her mind endlessly. What if Daniel heard? What if the truth didn't come from her, but from the mouths of others? The injustice of it all was sharp. Daniel had done nothing to deserve betrayal. He had worked through long nights, sacrificing his own rest, just to ensure she had comfort. And here she was, carrying a child that might not even be his. Racial tensions added another layer of fear. Marcus was from a background Daniel's family might never accept. If the child bore features linked unmistakably to Marcus, the truth wouldn't need words. It would be etched into the baby's skin, visible for the world to see. And in a community where whispers carried faster than the wind, the scandal could spread like wildfire. Every moment felt like a countdown. Emily lived in dual realities, one where she was Daniel's loving wife, and another where the walls were closing in on her betrayal. The night before the birth, Daniel held her hand and whispered, "Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, we finally become a family." Emily smiled, but inside, she trembled. The delivery room was filled with the sterile scent of disinfectant, the rhythmic beeping of machines, and Daniel's steady voice reminding her to breathe. Hours blurred into waves of pain until finally, a cry pierced the air. A baby's cry. The nurse placed the newborn into Emily's arms. Tiny, fragile, yet holding the power to unravel her entire world. Daniel's face glowed with pride as he leaned over, tears streaming down his cheeks. But Emily's gaze froze. The baby's features, subtle yet undeniable, were not Daniel's. In the curve of the lips, the shape of the eyes, she saw Marcus. Her breath caught in her throat. The room seemed to spin. Daniel, oblivious, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Our baby. Our miracle." In that moment, guilt transformed into terror. Would Daniel see it too? Would the nurses exchange knowing glances? She searched their faces for signs of suspicion, but they remained professional, handing Daniel the baby as if nothing was wrong. Daniel cradled the child with tenderness that broke her. He looked down at the infant with a love so pure it could blind him to truth itself. He whispered promises of protection, of being the best father, and Emily felt herself shatter. Her betrayal had been born into flesh and blood. The climax wasn't loud. It wasn't a confrontation or an explosion. It was silent, a secret lodged between her heartbeats and his joy. The child in Daniel's arms was living proof of her choices, and yet he saw only a blessing. And that silence, that unspoken truth, became louder than any scream. Life moved forward, as it always does. Daniel introduced the baby to family and friends, proudly declaring himself a father. He spoke of futures filled with birthdays, first steps, and endless love. Emily played along, smiling for pictures, accepting congratulations. But inside, every moment was a reminder of the lie she had chosen to protect. The betrayal never erupted into chaos. It simmered, hidden beneath layers of love, laughter, and photographs that would one day hang on walls. Emily had locked the truth away, but she knew it wasn't gone. One day, a resemblance might be noticed. One day, the past might claw its way to the surface. Until then, she carried the burden. Every time Daniel held their child, every time he called them ours, she felt the weight of her choices pressing down like chains. Betrayal doesn't always reveal itself in explosions. Sometimes it lingers quietly, poisoning even the happiest of moments. Emily's story wasn't one of exposure, it was one of silence. A silence that might last a lifetime. And so the question lingers, is it kinder to preserve a lie if it protects someone's happiness, or does true love demand the pain of honesty?